It's time for Supply Chain Now Radio, broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Supply Chain Now Radio spotlights the best in all things supply chain. The people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, good afternoon. Scott Luton here with you live on Supply Chain Now Radio. Welcome back to the show. Today's show is our latest installment in the hashtag Leadership Matters series, which is, of course, sponsored by our friends over at the Effective Syndicate. But here's the deal. We have a twist on the old routine. This is the Coach's Corner edition of Leadership Matters. We asked for your questions in the last few days, and now our panel is going to stand and deliver. Stay tuned. Quick programming note, like all of our series on Supply Chain Now Radio, you can find our replays on a variety of channels: Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast from. As always, we'd love to have you subscribe so you don't miss anything. Okay, so let's welcome in our featured esteemed guest today. We have Bo Groover, founder and president of the Effective Syndicate. Bo, how you doing?
If I were any better, I'd be twins.
Noted. And secondly, we have Greg White, co-host, or serial co-host here at Supply Chain Now Radio. Serial supply chain tech entrepreneur and trusted advisor. Greg, how you doing?
I'm doing great. It's been a big day.
Yeah,
today.
Three shows, big production day. But great conversations from the remote podcast this morning, talking about the latest and greatest in logistics tech, and our friends at EFT, to the show we just wrapped up with Tony Schroeder and the Reverse Logistics Association, to now we're talking a lot of things: culture, continuous improvement, leadership, teamwork, a lot of things here at the Coach's Corner. So, Bo, I got to ask, what coach did you have in mind when you coined this corner as the coaches?
Don't know that one specific coach. Remember the webinar we did? Yep. Building a team? Yep. And it occurred to me as I was doing all of that coaching research, there's probably a lot of people who have questions, but maybe they don't have the person in their network. So, asking your spouse is probably hit or miss. It's a little bit tough to ask people that you work with because you don't know, are they going to tell somebody, or, are they, just trustworthy? Do they have this kind of information? So we figured a degree removed from the actual situation to say, look, in general, what are some of the questions that you'd like to ask a coach? And we got tremendous response. So I'm pretty excited about the first one. And then hopefully this becomes a series depending on what kind of feedback and traction it gets.
Agreed. I'm with you. I had a coach in mind, though. Did you have a coach in mind?
Not Dabo. I've had some good coaches, but probably the best life coach, sports coach ever has to be John Wooden. I was introduced to John Wooden at a really young age. I was born on the very day that Texas Western, now the UTEP, fielded the first
Hill Steppers, right?
Hilltoppers.
Hilltoppers.
No, I don't know. I don't know what they were when they were Texas Western, but on the date that I was born, my mother loves to tell the story that my father was late getting to the hospital because Texas Western was fielding the first all-black starting five in the NCAA finals against UCLA. My father was a big John Wooden fan, but also was a huge fan of seeing this historic event occur. So that started my love for basketball, and of course, the introduction to John Wooden.
And he almost missed your arrival.
He did almost.
Nice.
Yes. The Miners.
My mother loves to remind him.
UTEP Miners.
There you go.
And so one last thing before we get to our first question, because the first question will be about culture. And when I think as a long-time Clemson fan, we had a lot of great coaches. Danny Ford's a great coach. Tommy Bowden was a good man. Dabo Sweeney is an outstanding person, coach, leader, and he's done things at Clemson that that you would think as a fan would not be accomplishable, if that's a word. And he is, from day one, he's been about culture from day one. Before all the stuff that he's done, the wins, and really, and you can relate to this, Bo, because as a fan, I can feel it, and I bet as a player, you can really feel it. Is you feel like you can go into the game and win.
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, for decades as a Clemson fan, we'd go to the games. There was always that dread, right?
Right.
Man, it's not the case anymore. So that's right when I saw that you'd coined it, this edition, new series, Coach's Corner. Of course, that's that, and probably Bobby Cox. That's a different story. Okay, so let's take our first question. And Greg, I think you're going to share that with us, right?
Yes, I am. So this is sort of an amalgamation of questions.
Nice
word. You wanted me to pick that word. So because we got so many on this topic. So I'm going to read this because it's kind of long and blended together. So it is a lot of supply chain leaders that I speak to are talking culture, especially a culture that attracts top talent, and especially a culture that empowers the team to succeed. It unleashes a team to go out and win. So what? Did he just read this question? So what goes into that kind of culture, and how do you go about creating it? So that's what folks in the network generally are talking about.
Sure.
So you want to take it?
I want to start it. I think it's a great question, and it's probably one we could do the whole show on that question, right? We're not going to in the interest of time, but I think a lot goes into it, right? So a lot of organizations, in my experience, don't spend enough time assessing where they are. And also my experience shows that the further removed from the day-to-day grind, if you will, the less aware the leaders are of the culture.
Yep.
So I'll talk with a C-level executive, and he'll tell me about this can-do spirit, get-it-done, entrepreneurial team of people that are just setting the world on fire. And then I start talking to the people, and they think, or they tell me, we're successful in spite of that guy. So there's the first part in my mind is truly assessing where you are, current state, and the second step would be determining where you want to go. And that's not an individual sitting in his office and penning out a bunch of buzzwords, but that's sitting around with a team of people that work in that building and saying, all right, guys and gals, what culture do we want to have here at this place? And let's get really, really clear. Let's wrestle about it. Let's fuss and cuss with each other, and let's hammer it out, right? It can't be a list of 74 buzzwords. It's got to be 5 to 10 core behaviors, core values that people will buy into, and then you go about implementing it. And I think we can talk a lot about implementing it, but from my perspective, that is the starting point of, number one, determining where you are, and number two, determining where you want to go.
I think it's that all of that's true, and I think in addition to it is about this empowerment word, but it's a little bit different than saying you're empowered. Right. First of all, I firmly believe, I'm 100% convinced, and will never be convinced otherwise, that the culture in a company comes from the top. Usually one person at the top, and usually that person is at the very top. And that culture is developed, whether that culture is intentional or accidental. So you have to, as a leader, you have to be very intentional about the culture that you create. Otherwise, you get the culture that you enable. And that may be a reflection of your personal processes, your personal strengths and weaknesses, and you may not want your organization to have those weaknesses or biases or whatever those things are. So you have to be very, very intentional about what those things are. And I think the other thing to think about he started a timer on me, which threw me off.
No, not for you.
I think the other thing that you have to think about from a culture standpoint is that empowering people is about uncovering their greatness. I think, one of the terms that coaches use a lot is getting the best out of my team, or getting the best out of my players.
That's right.
Or whatever. But when you take that literally, it can be easily misinterpreted. It's not getting the best. It is uncovering their gifts and enabling those gifts to help them grow and help the team perform.
Okay.
And again, that's something I learned from John Wooden. Is he was about personal responsibility, about understanding your role and understanding your personal gifts, and then using those. So another great coach. I can't believe I'm going to say this because I hate the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Right, we just lost all the podcast charts in the state of Pennsylvania. Thanks,
okay.
Greg.
Go Chiefs. Chuck Noll, his philosophy was to get great athletes and build his offense particularly around those great athletes. Right. And that's almost always a successful culture.
Sure.
Right? So not only do you define the culture, but you somewhat adapt the culture to the people that you have as well. Again, being intentional, but it has to be flexible as well.
Right. Or go get the people that you need. Right. So you try to build around what you have, but at the end of the day, if I need a quarterback and I don't have one, I'm not going to try to take a defensive lineman and say, I need a quarterback, so you're it.
Right.
So we're back to the Ducks.
Yep. Well, I think we talk about empowerment. One of the easiest things to understand about empowerment, at least to me, is allowing folks to make decisions and take gambles. I think we've all worked in organizations, I certainly have, where the culture has been very empowering. They push decisions down. Mm-hmm. They encourage folks to try new things, and of course, if you fail, you got to. If you're not failing,
you're standing still. Yeah,
you're standing still, right? And you want to fail and fail fast, but you've got to experiment. You've got to, I believe, the type of culture that pulls people to you is a type of culture where the leaders are constantly letting others make decisions. I think winning cultures and cultures that attracts people are cultures that don't have a punitive structure, right? They're not constantly looking for ways to dock you here or punish you here or take this back or take that back, but rather they provide lots of incentives for going above and beyond. I think of heck, we're doing this right here. Vector Global Logistics.
That's right.
And the third point, when I think of cultures that pull people to them, is those cultures and those organizations that give back. And this is an outstanding testimony to a culture that's dedicated to giving back. And then one last thing that's kind of related to each of these in some ways is a culture that allows people whatever position they're in, wherever they rank, so to speak, or whether you're a CEO, or whether you're an analyst, or whether you're a department manager, whatever, a culture that allows all these folks to understand the mission and where they play in the big picture. I think that is so important. And I've been a part of organizations where they only want to give you this much information, right?
Need to know basis.
Yes, and that is not a culture that is built to win in my book.
Well, and to further that point, people want to be valuable to an organization, to the purpose, whatever is driving a particular company, but they also want to be valued. If you can accomplish those two things, helping people feel valuable and be valuable and feel valued,
you're halfway there.
That's a huge part of culture, right? I mean, the biggest reason that people leave jobs is not because of pay. It's because they either didn't or both didn't feel valued or feel valuable.
Right.
Right.
Well, and the other part, you talk about the empowerment thing, right? So as a human being, I can't empower another human being, right? That I can't. I don't have any conveyance or control over another human being. What I can do as a leader is create an environment of empowerment, and I can engage people and challenge them and encourage them to walk through. But at some point, and here's the power of this culture, I think it allows you to drive harder. So a lot of the executives say, well, if you care that much about your people, can you really push? And I would argue, if the more you care, the harder you can push, because now I've got an agreement. I've created an environment, Greg, if you worked here, right? I need you to do these things. I need you to take these risks. I need you to be willing to try something new. And after the third or fourth time I say that, and I don't see activity on your side, now the conversation is going to be a little bit different of, Greg, here's the culture that we want to build here. Are you sure you want to be a part of it? Mm-hmm. So it becomes this agreement that says, look, here's the expectations of working here. We want a dynamic workplace. We want to have empowered people. We want to be willing to take risks and try new things. Yep. And it's not punitive. What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Let's go get after it. But at the end of the day, the expectation falls to the people who work there to say, all right, I know the culture I'm in because it's been explained to me 79 times. I understand it. It's on me now.
Yeah. I think you also find that if you truly allow people to be empowered or create an environment of empowered, you don't have to push as much.
Oh yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
You will get more out of people. I mean, I just recently exited a company where there were just a handful of us at the start, and we were very intentional about identifying our core values and identifying our culture and living our culture. And it was easy to do because we were in a room not much bigger than you can see on camera here, but and by the way, that was a really productive environment to be that close to one another at that stage of the company. But in addition to that, we all knew what our higher purpose was, right? The purpose of the company, and we had the ability to say, hey, we need to accomplish this, not do this. We need to accomplish this goal. And everyone knows the boundaries, so we need to accomplish this goal, and because we need to accomplish this goal, Peter or Mike or whoever, go out and do it, and make it happen. And they knew where they stood, they knew what they were able to do, and they felt the power, right, to actually accomplish it in their way, right, right. And that, honestly, that was a growth point for me. I've not always been that kind of manager, so I've experienced that firsthand and very recently, and to success as well. So
let's, as you said, that first question was, what do you call it?
Amalgamation.
Thank you very much. So some of the folks that went into that question that I thought about, Mike Wasson at Tosca, Brian Green at HMTX Industries, Kristen Ferecki at Convoy. Boy,
Enrique here at
certainly
Vector.
Enrique Alvarez here at Vector, Vivian Greentree at Fiserv. Think about giving back and mission and duty and the big picture. I mean, these are really cultures that, as you sit here and talk with leaders that describe it, you can almost see it in their eyes, and you want to follow them through a brick wall. And that's what I mean when you try to make this thing about culture, which of course is cliche. Everyone likes talking about culture, but making it real tangible is when the leaders of these organizations, of these right cultures, come and speak to the room, and that room is ready to follow them into battle.
That's right.
Okay.
Well, I think that's the cowboy principle, right? If you want to know if you're a good leader, turn around every once in a while and see if the herd's following you.
It is true. I mean, you're not a leader, right, because you have whatever exceptional gifts or because you command it. You are a leader because people follow you. That's the only validation that you get. That's right.
And it's a gift, right? If people are willing to follow you, then recognize that you've been given a gift. Cherish it.
Yep.
So next question. That was a great warm-up question, I think, or a great amalgamation of the topic.
Yes,
maybe. So the second question, big shout out to Allison Giddens, and I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly. And she asked, are there certain common qualities you've noticed the best candidates have when someone is new to the industry and looking to get a job in the supply chain areas, logistics, manufacturing, etc.? And so
read that again.
Okay. I think she's asking certain common qualities you've noticed for the best candidates have when someone is new to getting into the supply chain industry or the supply chain area of a job. So what are those
I'll start
qualities?
While you kind of consider what you want to share. I believe, and we talked about this, it seems like on every show here lately, in the military there's an esprit de corps, there's a sense of mission, there is I've got your back, there's a kindred spirit that is, for me, it is very difficult to replicate that on the private sector side. However, when I think about my time in manufacturing, there is a lot of those elements, get good parts out on time and working across functional areas, folks that are a strong bias for action, that get a sense of purpose and want to work with others. That's some of the qualities that strike me when I saw this question. In the supply chain arena, in logistics and manufacturing, is so much different than so many other like professional services. I can't remember the numbers. Maybe Malcolm can hook us up. But if you look at the lead time associated with some of the professional services, right, and how much time they can to get to this and get to that versus stamping blanks. Right. It can be night and day. So when I read this question, it's like the better candidates are folks with a strong bias for action, that it's not about lip service, it's about jumping in and working with whomever's on the team to get it out the door or to make it happen.
I think for supply chain, a lot of, like you described, a lot of the qualities that are in any good candidate apply here, but I think particular to supply chain, so we can hopefully I'm helping Allison out a little bit, is I think you have to be able to plan for the best, plan very strongly, considering alternative and possible scenarios, and then respond rapidly and effectively when those planned scenarios never occur. Right. Right. I mean, the first thing you learn about project management is the second thing you do after you create a project plan, you revise it. Right. Because nothing ever goes to plan. And I think that's, by the way, why so many military vets are great candidates for supply chain. They make life and death decisions instantaneously. Right, with inadequate information
while regularly improvising,
and that's the nature of business in a lot of ways, but particular to supply chain. Planning, not for the best case scenario, but planning for the expected case scenario is so important, because that gives you financial boundaries to be able to operate under. And financial expectations, which are critical for managing any business, but then being able to attack, if you will, when you get outflanked. So I think that's probably the most important quality. Flexibility, adaptability, whatever you want to call it. It's the ability to undertake those actions.
Yeah, and I think the people who I've seen thrive are the people who don't expect a routine. So if you're coming into the supply chain world and you think today is going to look like yesterday, that's going to look like the day before, this is probably not going to be your gig, because the reason we call it a chain are all of the individual links that go into it. There's the warehouse and the logistics and the freight and the warehouse and the packaging and the labeling and the customs and the
customers
and the customers,
which never do what we want them to do.
No, darn customers, know. So it's that ability to adapt and improvise and overcome, but the people who like that love the supply chain, because I guarantee you something's going to happen.
It's action-packed.
Action-packed is a good way of, maybe all the job descriptions should start out action-packed.
Yeah. It should be like a movie photo.
I think also folks that lean in and are willing to be a problem solver, which takes independent action, and it takes folks that are willing to critical thinking, right? They're willing to figure things out on their own and not take step-by-step directions, because we don't have that in supply chain, right? In many ways,
in some places, but even that doesn't solve the problem.
Good point.
Yeah. Well, and I think that the other thing that we've learned about, or that we need to, it's a general coaching thing, is don't take it personally.
Yeah.
It's work. And if something goes off the rails, it's not because Joe's a jerk, it's because something broke down in the process. So that problem solving is, look, I can sit here and get my feelings hurt and spend a few hours complaining to my colleague about it and do something else to get my mind off of it, or I can say, look, I got to acknowledge this and move on. It's kind of a surfer's mentality, and say, it is what it is. I got to move into problem solving, right? It's time for that bias for action. I don't have time to sit around with my feelings hurt. I can, if I need to, I can sit at home later and feel sorry for myself or whatever.
Or admiring the problem, which I know you've talked about, right? Complimenting the problem. Explain real quick what we're talking about, what you talk about when you say that.
Yeah, so one of my coaches, who was my lean teacher long time ago, I was convinced we had uncovered the world's most complicated problem. And we had it all lined up on the wall, and we were all talking about it, and John walks up and says, well, what are you guys doing? I said, man, John, look at this. And I went to proceed to explain the problem and how complicated it was. And
all the intricacies.
How unbelievably complex this was.
He leaves out the square root of 9 was the problem.
That's right. Written out, very long word problem, but really the answer. So he sat there and he nodded and he listened and he looked at the board and he nodded and he listened, looked at the board, and he patted me on the back and said, well, hey, whenever y'all are done admiring the problem, let me know and we'll fix it. And he walked off. And for a minute, I felt myself getting my feelings hurt. Oh my God, he doesn't understand or whatever. And it's like, I've known this guy for years. He's exactly right. What do we need to do? Yeah. And his comment lit a fire under all of us to say, all right, guys, let's get started working on this. We've stared at it long enough.
Yeah. I think one of the other things you have to do, and because you get so many opportunities to have problems and issues, right? So you build a plan, the plan fails, or the conditions never occur to allow the plan to succeed as is, but you've got to capture those conditions that occur repeatedly and build them into the plan. So that ability to sort of reverse engineer things from the goal back, that's another critical point of success for someone, particularly in supply chain, because you've got to constantly be revising the plan to account for more of those conditions that were previously unexpected but continually occur.
Right. And if they continue to occur, they're not exceptions anymore, right?
Yeah,
that's part of the process.
Yeah.
So let's summarize for Allison. We said bias for action. We said
the ability to plan and adapt.
Plan and adapt. Don't take it personally. And prepare to be action-packed.
Action-packed. And I love that. Don't admire the problem.
Yeah, don't admire the problem.
We'll take feedback.
Yeah.
That's another one. Right. And just to connect the dots, Allison's a great friend of the show. She serves as Director of Operations at Wintech, which they do other things there, but they also make high-precision aerospace components. So the C-140s, the Hercules.
C-130s, Hercules.
C-130s. Gosh, you should give me some demerits.
Don't say I should be in the Air Force, because that's also what Senator Dole said.
The longest running military platform. It's been made for 50 plus years. Well, those are some of her parts that go into that, and of course that they make that parts for that right around the corner. Okay, thanks for that question, Allison. Okay, third question comes from Karen Kadavi. She asked, with organizations moving more and more to remote worker structures, how do you communicate the vision, the mission, vision, and maintain a semblance of Three Musketeers, all for one and one for all?
Oh, nice. So that's Karen Kadavi. And a great question, and I think it's a very poignant one right now, right? So as we're talking, we often talk about that generational shift that's happening right now. The boomers are leaving, the millennials and post-millennials are coming in. And their expectations are certainly different than the generations in front of them. So I think it's a tricky one. I mean, I think, again, it's going to fall on how well or how effective or ineffective you are at communicating. So the best organizations that I see, when they're interviewing a candidate before they even make an offer, they say, let us tell you about the culture it is to work here. Here's our core values. Here's how we live our lives. Here's how we measure our expectations of not only performance, but the engagement of the workforce. So, there's the performance aspect. Did you get the reports done? Did you process the POs? Did you do all of those kind of tasky things? But on the culture side, which we've just talked about for a while, is extremely important, maybe the most important. It's about the values. How do you interact with your other human beings? Do you have a bias for action? Are you a problem solver? Are you are you trying to make a difference? Are you trying to make a point? Kind of things. And so I I think if you've got those core values defined, before you even bring somebody onto the team, you ought to start having that conversation and asking questions during your interview process about it. That would be the starting point in my mind.
You know, one thing I've seen done to great success, because the last two companies I've been with, I've run, have had remote workforces, and not always millennials, by the way. Some of us in Generation X, the forgotten generation, right? You know, one of the things that we were very intentional about, and you're going to hear me use that word a lot, but we were very intentional about, was reinforcing the values. I learned this from a coach, Eric Perkins, a friend of mine from Michigan, and we at least weekly not only restated a particular value with the entirety of the company in attendance, and that included our staff in India. Thank you to them, by the way, for doing this in the middle of the night their time, because it was lunchtime our time on Fridays. With all of our remote workers on camera, we insisted on camera, and with the people who were actually working in the office that day. And we not only reinforced a value, you know, bias for action or whatever it was, we would reinforce that value, but we would also give an example of that value every single week, because it created the relatability to say, hey, you know, if you're looking for customer obsession was one of our values. If you're looking for an example of customer obsession, that's Bobby staying up all night to fix this code problem and make sure that it happened, right? So, you know, there were all of those kind of opportunities, and that constant, continual, and in some cases scheduled, though we would reschedule, scheduled reiteration of our very short list, 4 or 5, always, core values. Made sure that, I mean, people could walk around and go, you are obsessing about the customer, right? They could go, you are always happy but never satisfied. You are, you know, whatever, right? Showing integrity right now. I mean, people understood the values very clearly, right?
They knew what it looked like, right? They could relate to it. It's not just a word hanging on a wall.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, they just got constant reinforcement for it. And I think the other thing, as goes to the, you know, one for all for one and one for all thing, which also happens to be the motto of my fraternity.
Also happens to be your Bryan Adams. So aren't you going to see Bryan Adams in concert?
No.
Cuts like a knife.
Cuts like a knife. Yeah, I don't want to see that. But anyway, the other thing that did that was having people get together, and it was fascinating to be standing up there in front of the whole company, but then to watch the conversations happen between somebody sitting in the audience in the U.S. and somebody on camera in India or you know, or Europe or whatever. And it really did create that camaraderie. And I often did stupid things inadvertently, in front of the team, which gave them a great opportunity to bond.
Right.
So, again, intentional, and I think in person, or as in person as you can be. So that's an expensive Zoom meeting or whatever that is, but it's worth every penny to do it.
Malcolm shot me a note that said you're going to see Billy Idol, and don't ever get Billy Idol confused with Bryan Adams again. So Malcolm's a little testy.
Well, what confused you is DHL had Bryan Adams at their 50th anniversary celebration, and we saw that recently. My friend Andrew Mitchell. Yeah,
that and 5-syllable words just really throws me for a loop. Real quick, this is neat. So Allison Giddens, who of course posed that last question, has already responded to our LinkedIn post, and she states, "Thanks for answering my question on the air. I like that. Don't admire the problem. That's so easy to get hung up on. I also like the ideas to find people who expect the unexpected and who are always ready to jump right in. Thanks. Great advice. Thanks."
That's awesome.
That is really neat. I love the instantaneous communication cycles, feedback. We got to get her on one of these coaches' corners.
Okay.
She asks great questions, but she can also give great answers.
I bet. So, the other part, I think, to reinforce what you were talking about, Greg, and I really like the example of demonstrating it, right, and articulating it and say, all right, this is what this looks like. This is what obsession over the customer looks like. But the other thing, the converse is to call people out when they're not.
Oh, yeah.
And I honestly think that is a bigger miss in too many organizations where, if we say teamwork is a core value, but we all know that one, brilliant jerk that nobody wants to work with, but he's a wicked smart engineer, that's not it. And when those things happen, it doesn't have to be a public stoning kind of thing, but pull them to the side and say, hey, Joe, in that meeting, when this happened, the whole room felt it. And you didn't notice it, and I wanted to make sure you understood when you said that thing that you said, it took the air out of the room, and that's not our core value of teamwork. Can I help you with this? And so to put it on the wall to reinforce the positive is a huge, that's a great start, that's a good step. But to ignore the things when people are not following it, even that you'd write them up for not doing the time and attendance, you'd write them up for not showing up for work, but we don't address it when the behaviors get bad, to me that is a huge miss, and it hurts a lot of cultures.
It has to be so ingrained into the company that, and this still happens at Blue Ridge under the new management team, but it has to be so ingrained that you evaluate, you hire, you evaluate, and you fire people based on their adherence to those core values. So we had a system where, again, introduced to us by Eric Perkins, but we had a system whereby you got a plus minus, or a minus, and we allowed 0 minuses. Minuses means does not exhibit that core value, and if you got a minus, you were out. I mean, it has to be, your culture is, as so many say, the most important thing in your company, and if it is truly the most important thing in your company, you have to defend it.
So along those lines, one of my favorite episodes out of all 166 that we have published was Sheila Sitzer from Panera Bread. Sheila serves as Director of HR, International Business and Global Supply Chain at Panera Bread, which is doing some incredible things. And you can go back and listen to our episode 104 to kind of get the backstory there. But quotable quotes, their culture, to your point, to both y'all's points, and when it comes to hiring, is no jerks.
Yeah.
Just that.
We use a different word, but it was the same principle.
Well, so that's leadership principle number 1. Don't be and it's not the word jerk.
Yeah. It means the same.
It rhymes with Rick.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, I wasn't thinking there.
So thanks to Karen for
absolutely.
that great question. And I think we've got one more we're going to tackle here.
Do I get to ask this one? Okay, good.
You get it.
Okay, I'm going to open this one with the precursor, because this is from our friend, Mr. Supply Chain, right? And the author of Supply Chain for Dummies, Daniel Stanton. This should be fun. Okay, here's one for you. We all want to feel safe to express ourselves at work, right? So how do we strike a balance so that we avoid offending anyone, yet don't create an environment that feels so politically correct that everyone is afraid to say anything? That's, again, from Daniel Stanton. So that's a toughie. Do you need a minute?
No, I don't need a minute, but I'm probably going to be very unpolitically correct.
Do you need a safe space?
I don't, no. So I think that we've lost a lot, and somehow we have completely gotten this thing upside down. And so the problem is now we think we've got to adapt and morph our culture so that everyone fits in. Okay, and I will tell you, I read a book called High Velocity Culture Change years ago by Pritchett and Pound, I think. And one of the comments they said was, if everyone fits into your culture, it's because you don't have a culture. And so rather than saying, we've got to continually morph and modify and twist ourselves into a pretzel so everybody feels welcome, to me is just a bass-backwards way to try to build a culture in a company.
So I'm focusing on a very specific aspect of Daniel's question, and because I've had this conversation with him, we had this conversation with he and Sherry Heinisch and Scott and I think where he's going with that is, look, let's face it, my mother worked in the workplace before it was even remotely civil for females, right? So I've heard horror stories since I was a little kid, right? I'm very, very conscious of that. Plus I have 3 daughters. So I think what he's referring to is real safety, like, sexual harassment and that sort of thing, bullying, office bullying and that sort of thing. Those are obvious and egregious examples, but how do you not let that become I don't want somebody to have the American flag in their in their cubicle or something like that. If you think about it that way, it goes back to the don't be a pick your word aspect of it, and common civility, right? And using that as your North Star, if you will, and ruthlessly eliminate bad behavior.
Yes.
Which is different than eliminating any sort of self-expression, right, or eliminating anyone's ability to be who they are if they're not being one of those words, an asshole. So you can blip that later. But I think it is a tough balance to strike. I heard of a company that in Canada, let's say, where they have a no scent zone.
Okay.
So you're not allowed to wear cologne or perfume in the office. And the biggest complainant, however, an abuser of the system, is a heavy, heavy smoker who comes in smelling like smoke and then complains about anybody who comes in and has perfume or cologne on. So you have to be willing to confront those kind of iniquities in your environment in order to do that, because you have to recognize that there are troubled people who will manipulate a scenario like that, and you have to be ruthless about that as well.
Well, and I think I agree, right? And so the principle for me is a respect for people, right? So you show me respect, I'll show you respect. And by the way, your rights end where mine begin. And so, if I've got the premise of respect for people, the egregious things, the bullying, the sexual harassment, the racist jokes kind of things, I'm not going to negotiate. I'm not going to sit down and lecture you and discuss this with you. I'm going to tell you one time, I'm going to tell you before I hire you, here's what we work towards, here's our culture. The first time I hear that, I say, if I ever hear anything like that again, you're out. It is a ruthless, I'm not going to debate you. I'm not going to try to fix whatever you didn't get coming up from your parents and your teachers and your coaches. I'm just not interested in that.
Well, because it comes down to judgment, and judgment is very difficult to teach and coach on, I believe. And in those cases where if you have to take the time to teach judgment in terms of just some common sense stuff,
right?
You don't have time for that in the workplace.
Right. Yeah.
We're action-packed.
And I think
we got time. We got to go.
Well, and I think, I think sometimes people feel really alone in the decision-making around this. And I feel like, if we want to create a safe space for managers, and that's kind of what Daniel is talking about, don't make the decision alone.
Right.
Right. And often we kowtow to somebody who is so obnoxious in the workplace that we give them a pass because we don't want to confront it. And the theory that I always worked on, at all the companies I've ever managed is it's either one of us or it's all of us. Either this one person has to go, or they erode the culture for everyone.
That's right.
And that's a matter of whether they are an abuser and maybe asking to feel safe on ridiculous subjects or topics like the whole non-scented scenario, right? Or if they are that abuser, right? If they are the actual abuse, the actual actor on another member of the team, you can't allow it. You just simply cannot allow it to erode the culture. I have allowed it. I have allowed it in the past, and I have regretted it significantly. And ultimately, when I came to that recognition that it's either one of us or it's all of us. We are letting this one person drag the entire organization down, and it sends a terrible signal to everyone else. Well, let's just say they're just not a good worker.
Right.
They just refuse to work. You can't allow that to continue, because then other people start looking around and going, why would I work so hard?
That's right.
It's not different than that.
It is not. Well, and to that end, I think, I've worked with a guy who we were having a conversation, and he said, well, Bo, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yeah.
And one of my colleagues, who was also a senior person to this one, says, yeah, and he's also the first one that gets replaced. And so that ruthlessness of saying, look, we are going to protect our culture, because you cannot build a culture that everybody can fit into.
Yeah.
It is impossible to do. I mean, it's society, right? So, maybe this isn't the right place for you. And clearly articulating those things during the interview process, reinforcing those things during conversations with your colleagues, reinforcing those things at whatever annual performance appraisals you do with your organization. The core values have got to be part of that conversation to say, look, we're building and protecting this culture.
Yep.
And when you see behaviors that don't match it, you got to address them with a ferocity that says, look, I'm not playing around, I'm not screwing around with this.
Yeah.
And usually, my experience is you address the first couple of times you see that, most people recognize it. Oh, okay, it's different. It really is different.
Yeah. Yeah, they mean it.
Right.
Well, I know these are just 4 of several buckets of questions that were submitted, right? And I think the consensus is, Bo, I believe what you said the other day, we've got enough for 17 shows.
We've got plenty.
But we also don't want to. We'll be getting back out via social media and probably asking for keeping fresh questions is never a bad thing. But we're going to get together and plan the next Coach's Corner. These were big thanks to Allison and Karen and Daniel for taking the time to really pose some very meaningful questions. Yep. Right.
And the other folks,
we'll get to them.
Yep, we're gonna put together another episode, and we will be broadcasting it across our normal channels, and maybe just a general conversation, if I can, before you wrap us up, Scott. All of this stuff around culture and team dynamics and team leadership means someone has to be willing to wade into the nasty, murky, deep water of the culture. Whether that's behavior, whether that's addressing people, whether that's fixing things that have been let to linger for months, years, decades. If you want to have a world-class culture that attracts and retains the best and the brightest out there, somebody's got to be willing to get out there and get muddy, because it's not straightforward. It's not 2 + 2 = 4. It's 2 + 2 = purple divided by the square root of grapefruit. Repeat that for me, Greg.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was never very good at math.
Me either, obviously. I've got fruit involved.
Well, and I think that is what leadership is wading into the murky waters or eliminating the murkiness of the waters, right? That is leadership. I mean, you have to have the guts, whatever, intestinal fortitude is what one of my coaches always called it. You have to have the intestinal fortitude to do that. And you do have to be, I'm going to say it again, guess what I'm going to say, intentional.
Right.
And you have to be ruthless in regard to protecting the culture. But leadership is the person who goes headlong into the breach. That's not because it's a good idea, right? Not because it's well researched, but because it's necessary.
It needs to be done.
Right? Yeah.
That's exactly right. Exactly.
So, I know fresh on the heels of the executive roundtable that you spoke at last week, Bo, and we're going to have the next one of those in December, I believe. And between now and then, you're also speaking up at Western Michigan, I believe.
I've
right?
got, I'm on a little bit of a circuit here. I've got a speaking engagement coming up at Western Michigan, and then I'm also speaking at the University of Georgia to some operations students.
Dr. Troy Montgomery.
That's right. Dr. Troy's bringing me in.
Yeah, and so to our listeners, there's so many there's over 500 supply chain programs now across the country at the collegiate level, tech school level, you name it, but UJ's building a great program. And to get, I've already called him Dr. Montgomery. We get that out once and we can call him Troy. But he is really, coming from someone that did it, and now he's instilling that into those students and getting them out into plants. He took 40 students probably out to the Caterpillar plant out near Athens. That's some of the secret sauce. So kudos to him, and looking forward to you speaking and interacting with those students.
And UGA is also building an amazing football program. I just want to point that out for you, Scott.
Go
Dogs. Go Dogs.
True. That is true. Okay, well, now we just lost all of our viewers down in Florida. Oh, man, come on. No, kidding. We live on all of them. Great conversation. So we're going to wrap up on just a couple upcoming events. To learn more, first off, to learn more, Bo, and to get in touch with you and the team, where can folks go?
Well, I'm glad you teed that up because I had forgotten. I'm going to ask something, and I hope this is not stupid, and I hope it doesn't backfire. But if you're not already, here goes. If you're not already connected with me on LinkedIn, I would ask if you listen to this episode, connect with me on LinkedIn. So this type of information we push out pretty regularly. We've got a team of people. We do blogs, posts, videos, webinars. It's Bo, B-E-A-U, Groover, G-R-O-O-V-E-R on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Bo Groover on LinkedIn. And
the only one I'm connected to.
You can also find us at theeffectivesyndicate.com, and hoping to see more of these great conversations continue.
There's a Boo Griever, I think, out in Denver.
Is that what it is? Yeah.
But so not that one.
Yeah, not Boo Griever.
Boo Griever. I've been Bo, I've been Bean, I've been Bear. I've been lots of things.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
I can't either. Okay,
Grover.
Great session. Stay tuned for more. We're going to do a lot more of the Coach's Corner. Appreciate all the interaction. So real quick, all of these events that we're about to walk through, events tab at supplychainradio.com. If you can't find what you're looking for, if you can't, for that matter, for some reason you can't get connected with the Effective Syndicate, shoot us a note to connect at Supply Chain Radio, and we'll supplychainradio.com. We'll make sure to make that happen for you. Georgia Manufacturing Alliance, everyone here at the table will be there. Bo's leading a panel. I'm leading a panel. Greg is leading some high-profile interviews with several members of our team, our SWAT team. We're deploying to the Cobb Galleria. October 9th, all day. It's a place to be if you love manufacturing. Keynotes from P&G and Kia, and you can learn more at GeorgiaManufacturingAlliance.com. Then we're back in Charleston, October 23rd at the...
Sorry, back in Charleston. That's the Tech Talk.
Yes.
Right. That's South Carolina Competes Tech Talk. Sorry, right. I was still thinking about Georgia Manufacturing Summit. But yeah.
South Carolina Logistics Tech Talk. Our in partnership, we're broadcasting there in partnership with the South Carolina Council on Competitiveness, and registration's open, scompetes.org.
Yes, and I'm so glad they shortened that.
All right, and then Austin, Texas, EFT. We're talking to those guys this morning.
Yeah, November 7th and 8th.
Yep.
So that's the EFT Logistics CIO Forum.
Yep. That's
a pretty cool session with about 300 logistics CIOs. Strangely, Google has a logistics CIO. I saw that. I was not aware of that.
Well, look,
but everybody's got it now.
If you know anything about supply chain, you know the amount of money coming into and the investments being made in the supply chain tech, freight tech, logistics tech space. So these are two great opportunities. Whether if you're on the East Coast, Charleston is a place to be. It's inexpensive, a half day. You can hear from DHL Supply Chain and others on 1023. And if you want to go a little bit bigger, Austin in November 7th and 8th.
Share ideas with your colleagues there.
Absolutely.
It's a great opportunity.
And then flip the calendar. We're talking earlier today with Tony Shirota with the Reverse Logistics Association. Heck of a man. They're building something at RLA.
They are.
In a hot space across global supply chain, end-to-end supply chain. Their conference and expo out in Vegas in February 2020. Come out and see Bo at the craps tables, maybe?
Maybe.
Tony's going to be there, I can tell you that.
I usually only go to Vegas during college football season.
Oh, really?
I'm not a craps guy.
Let's go this weekend.
Guy. Yeah. Hey, okay. Sure.
He's got to clean out his basement, remember?
I've got big plans.
Reverse Logistics Association Conference Expo. You can learn more at rla.org. And then finally, we just secured, so Modex 2020, one of the largest supply chain trade shows in North America, 35,000 attendees. They're coming back to Atlanta. It goes ProMat in Chicago, then Modex in Atlanta, and back and forth. In March 2020, Modex will be here once again, 4 days. We're going to be broadcasting across the 4 days. And we just secured our keynote for the 2020 Atlanta Supply Chain Awards, which is being hosted by
Modex.
That's right. Christian Fisher, President and CEO at Georgia Pacific, will be keynoting our second year Atlanta Supply Chain Awards program. Looking forward to that. Details released just around the corner. We're currently redesigning the website and new logos. Had a lot of experts wading in, doing some great things. So to really build a bigger spotlight to put on all the leaders and organizations and really cool things that's going on across the Metro Atlanta supply chain.
Yeah, so if you're in Atlanta and you think you're doing something cool in supply chain, you better let us know.
That's right. Reach out. Sign up for Modex free. It's free. ModexShow.com. Okay. I don't think we missed anything. And if we did, we'll just stick around for one more show this afternoon, maybe. Bo, I have enjoyed this format. This is a departure from a lot of our shows. And, of course, what makes it possible is the input we've gotten, right, and the feedback we've gotten from the folks.
Thankful for that.
Yeah, it's critical. I could sit and listen to y'all talk. I'm very partial every day.
We could talk all day, too.
That's right, yeah.
But making this interactive,
No doubt.
and hopefully we continue to get more questions for ways that we can, in a short 10-minute per question type scenario. You're not going to boil the ocean and solve Middle East peace in 10 minutes, but hopefully it's just perspective and ideas, right? That hopefully will make a difference.
And we'll be posting more questions very soon. So,
that's right.
If you want to help out, you got a question, something's keeping you awake at night, those are the kind of things that we want to wade into with you.
Yep, great point. So big thanks to our guests today here, Supply Chain Now Radio, the Coach's Corner edition of Leadership Matters. Bo Groover with The Effective Syndicate. You can find him at theeffectivesyndicate.com or on LinkedIn. Of course, Greg White. Great to have you back once again. And
my pleasure to be here.
We look forward to our next few shows. To our audience, again, thank you for participating in this new format show here, Coach's Corner. Check out other upcoming events, replays of our interviews, other resources at supplychainnowradio.com. Of course, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, YouTube, all other sites where podcasts can be found. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. On behalf of the entire team, this is Scott Luton wishing you a wonderful week ahead, and we will see you next time on Supply Chain Now Radio. Thanks, everybody.